Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought I'd do a video talking about the F-16AJ, and this one is predicated on a lot of the discussions that I've been seeing over the last few days and over the last few weeks about the vehicle. A lot of people either not being happy by its addition, or being happy about its addition, or kind of contemplating what loadouts it should have, and also contemplating what it should look like. At the end of the day, what I want to kind of outline in this video is the general trend that we've been seeing when it comes to War Thunder, and how the only thing that matters when it comes to vehicles like this is making tech trees more similar to each other, and therefore a similar experience, and also a kind of nod towards the idea of balancing the game, whether you agree or disagree with the balancing. As always, if you enjoy this type of video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Probably going to do a lot more of them over the next year, because of the simple fact that this is going to be a hot button topic. In War Thunder's history, one of the things which has been interesting to see is the gradual change in, let's call it, mantra or general ideas from Gaijin, the actual creators of the game. One of the things that was very much talked about at the start of it was historical accuracy, even in battles themselves. There was only a few instances where there wasn't a historical stuff, and it was known as alternate history battles, where you would have stuff like USSR versus America fighting over Berlin. War Thunder back in the day, when it was just aviation, when I started, one of the key selling points was its historical accuracy. One of the interesting things is a lot of games do this. They actually try and push the historical accuracy angle because it's seen as a good selling point. The other game recently that has done it on quite a big level is Enlisted. And if you haven't been following Enlisted, well, let's just say, more recently, they've just made a massive change where they're actually focusing on balance of the game instead of historical accuracy, and it's going to benefit the game, in most ways, compared to others. When it comes to War Thunder, over the years, they have very much, even in the early days, focused on balance instead of history. And when they can, and when it makes sense to focus on history, they then focus on history. When it doesn't make sense, then guess what? There is something which is more prioritized, which is the ability to make all of the nations balanced against each other, and then also at the same time making each nation feel good. Now, a lot of people are going to dispute that, and that's completely fine. Imagine if they decided nowadays, when it comes to, the Japanese tech tree, that you didn't have the Hori production, or you didn't have the R2Y2s, or you didn't have the kicker in the form that it was in, or if you didn't have the F-16 that's coming in, or if you didn't have a bunch of other vehicles that are kind of there but kind of not when it comes to certain ones, such as the J6K one, which is another vehicle which never actually flew. Now, imagine if you lived in a world where none of those existed, and War Thunder literally just went straight down the historical line and didn't care about anything else. You would have a much more negative experience than you would now with the tech tree itself. And this is something that I'm trying to get through people's heads, and I don't think I'm communicating it pretty well. There are two realities when it comes to War Thunder. One, where they'd gone straight down the historical route, and the other one, which is this one, where they focused on balancing. A lot of people are getting caught up and going, even though they focused on the balancing, it's still not very balanced compared to like each of the nations, comparing them in this reality. Now think about the other reality, where they focus fully on history, and therefore you don't have any of those vehicles we talked about, and also a lot of the vehicles have their negatives built into them. That world, that reality right there, is much more imbalanced than the reality we have right now. That is the two parallel things running along each other, not is this specific reality we live in balanced. Is it, the question is it more balanced than the reality that doesn't exist, right? And the answer is yes, because of all of the changes that they've made, and to try and focus on the experiences that are, going on. Now, I'm going to run through a bunch of examples to kind of show you why, like 7 months ago, I made a video called Fake Vehicles Will Eventually Come. And then also, even over a year ago, I made a video called Fake Battleships Confirmed, because they did a dev Q&A talking about this stuff. And then also, fake vehicle suggestions for War Thunder about 2 years ago, because it was very obvious what was happening. It was very obvious, at least to me, what the pattern was. And it was all predicated from something that was actually said not just last year, but previous years, but echoed last year. And it was the design philosophy of the game. When it comes to War Thunder, if you finish a nation or a tech tree, that is seen in Gaijin's view as a completed game. That's what a lot of people do. They major focus on one nation, get to the end of it, and there you go, done. So a lot of their research and a lot of their setups are set up around that point, which I highly disagree with. I think it's a really bad idea, and it leads to people getting annoyed if their nation in one update doesn't get a new shiny or falls out of the meta. I think it's a general bad idea to push people towards that, but that is what the philosophy is at the moment. So with that philosophy said, one of the things that has to be taken into account is now you have to make sure that every nation has similar experiences to each other, because you want all of your players to experience everything, and since they're not going to go to other tech trees in order to experience it, then you need each tech tree to have all the bells and whistles. So that leads to decisions like the F-16 going to Japan. It isn't the simple fact that, Japan needs to be balanced or whatever you want to call it. It's because of the fact that you have a bunch of people who play the Japanese tree who won't get any new content unless you add fake content to it for the time being, because of the simple fact that history dictates that there's nothing there. And in order to fit inside the design philosophy of most people only playing one nation, you need to add something to each nation every time in order to keep those players interested. And that's what we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years. Every nation gets at least one thing every update now, no matter what it is, whether it's a helicopter, naval vehicle, random tank, or random aircraft. That's what they do. And it's kind of cool because it means everybody gets something, and it also means a person like me can flip between tech trees and play different stuff, but also it pushes forward the design philosophy, which then means that players stay in those nations and don't branch out to other ones and get more and more frustrated because of the fact that they don't have the meta-defining vehicles, because as we've talked about many times, people want to win. And if you are left in a situation where you are put in a vehicle which is less efficient than the next person and you have no other options and nothing to actually push forward to, frustration happens, negativity happens, and therefore you start talking about it when it comes to the forums, when it comes to the Reddit, and you generally people come together and have consensuses about that negative setup, right? Happens with the British tree a lot, especially the higher echelon. Now, when we have a look at examples of this in the past or things that have been put in for balance reasons, you have stuff like the R2Y2s, obviously, which are still in the game, even though they are completely fake. You only have pretty much one fuselage and one book, which even mentioned what they were supposed to be like. The book itself, it talks about 3 versions of it, which is why we have 3 versions in the game. But yeah, it's completely fabricated. Then you've got the Swedish helis, the Mi-28, the Apache, literally vehicles they only tested for a week. They weren't in service, they weren't even picked, nothing like that. But Sweden had no other options and still has no other options. Then you got the SK-105 and then the JPZ. The only reason one's in the German tree is because when the SK-105 was coming to France, even though the whole Austrian thing and Argentinian thing, a lot of people complain that it should go into the German tree. So it's also in the German tree now. And, because a lot of people couldn't work out why it was in France. And the reason is because it was a vehicle which fit the general methodology of what a French vehicle is like. But they decided to put it in both because, it wasn't going to affect balance and people could enjoy both. Then the M47 for Japan, a vehicle that was tested and maybe used to design new vehicles for Japan, but not one that was ever used by the military, never in service. It's still in Japan, funnily enough. Then you have the HMS London, which we talked about the other day, a vehicle which literally didn't work. It was one which constantly needed repairs and also refits to keep it afloat because its superstructure could not handle the weight of the vehicle. That's an example of a vehicle that was in service but just didn't work properly. Then you've got the Kronstadt, literally a fake vehicle. It got built, I think, 10-20%, and that was it. It's a completely fabricated vehicle because it just never existed in the form that it's in. The E100, a vehicle which was never paired together. You had the hull, you had the turret, but they were never put in the same place. Then you got stuff like the Panther II, one of the versions that was supposed to be the Panther II, but was never built, just a paper design. The Tiger II 105 literally doesn't work in reality, and that was never built. The Coelian, a wooden mock-up of a turret. The whole reproduction, there's pretty much no evidence for the thing existing. And I'm still waiting for the lakes to be dredged to see if we can find those holes. Magic, the F-104S getting its countermeasures because one of its brothers got countermeasures. The ammunition and munition choices, the fact that they change reload speeds for balance for vehicles, the fact that they change what ammunition vehicles get access to is completely based around balance. They even do little changes here and there, like turret rotation speed and things like that at the highest tier of ground for balance reasons. It's not based on reality. It's guesstimation at the most. So when I look at all of these things, when I look at all of these factors, and when I look at the general philosophy behind it, it's no surprise to me that we see the F-16AJ. It's a vehicle which is one of those which was going to get added either way because, as I said, they want every nation to have the same feel. There's a massive literature of different vehicles that they've added which are probably in even worse situations than the F-16, and I'm just kind of surprised that this is the one that people are complaining about. Another thing to also note about the whole setup is when it comes to fake vehicles, should people enjoy them? Or what level are people fine with them? Like, how far does Gaijin go with this? I think generally, when you look at the future of the game, one of the things that is true is there is still thousands of vehicles they can add to the game. There are absolutely metric tons. But the problem is how much variety can you get out of those thousands of vehicles? And that is the key point. If the Israeli tree has taught us anything, it is that variety is very important. You can add, 8 to 10 to 20 M48s. You can add 20 M60s. You can add, 10 Centurions. At the end of the day, people are going to get very bored of those things. And variety is incredibly important. And one of the things that a lot of fake vehicles bring in, or failed production vehicles, or, prototypes that didn't get all their testing done, like the Yak 141, what these bring is something different and something interesting to the gameplay themselves. And that's why we're going to see more of these going forward. All of these are tests to see if we're all right with it. And the question is, the vast majority of people are. They just want to play the game. They don't care about these discussions. They just want to turn up and go, oh, that's a cool vehicle. I'm going to play that. And that's all it is. All of these other discussions are completely wasted. And when it comes to the munition stuff and what these vehicles should get, well, that's just going to be a balancing thing, as it always has been in the game. And has been the same for 5 to 6 to maybe even more years. We really need to get out of this historical mindset because Gaijin don't live in that world anymore. I don't think they ever did. It was just a way of marketing the game. For me personally, I would love to have only vehicles which were fully tested in the prototype stage. That's where my barrier is. But that's obviously not where Gaijin's barrier is when it comes to all this stuff. And that means we're going to get a lot of funky stuff in the future, and also a lot more of these topics where they feel like they have to reply to say what stuff should have and what stuff shouldn't. But at the end of the day, they should just say, we've decided to go along this route, because we are focusing on balance, and everything else gets thrown out the window and is secondary factors. That's all that matters and should be said, but it looks like that's not going to be, unfortunately. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Millie Draper, Juan the Panda, Nick R. Cupila, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie B. Young, Peter Grayling, Jerry Provolt, Bareen, Alan Hacker, Sem Arslan, Uncle Bean, Derek R., and Lafouche for supporting the channel.